Welcome back to the Minifig Maker, and today we're going to be looking at all of the figures that I've made over 2022. First off is Hawkeye with my two new Hawkeye figures. The first figure is Ronin, or Hawkeye in his assassin attire, in which he uses to take down a bunch of the crime families in Japan and around the world in the wake of Thanos' snap. This figure comes with a custom sheath to fit his sword inside. Next up is Kate Bishop, as she is portrayed by Haley Steinfeld in the Hawkeye show. You can see I've added detail to every part of her outfit, including the wrinkles on her burgundy sleeves and on the lilac part of her outfit, and I've even added detail of her quiver and her arrows. And I even painted on the laces of her boots and the arrow tips on her belt. Next up is Black Adam, or the first Shazam. This figure is one of my best figures because it contains an ungodly amount of detail, from the texture of his hood and of his cape and the holes in his cape to the runes that are painted on to his chest and arms and legs and his knee pads. Just, this figure is completely encased in detail, and I'm super proud of the way that it turned out. Onto my She-Hulk Attorney at Law figures. These figures are not some of my best. In fact, I feel they are just as good as the show. Trash. But there are some good parts, like some of the techniques I learned for this ripped sleeve on this figure, and some of the mistakes that I learned not to make, like this weird painting where part of it is shiny, and also the unnecessary bulk, or the weird texture that was painted onto this She-Hulk figure. But not all of the She-Hulk figures were bad, I think, because the next one is one that I'm super proud of. It's her gala dress. This one took me pretty long to make, and I had to use a bunch of different stuff that I had never used before, like glitter glue and different paints and stuff, but I think it really turned out pretty well because this dress is like super fluid too. You can see that I used the paper to make it flexible and bendy like a real dress, and you can see that I also painted the silver paint and then the glitter glue on top of her heels too. This figure is really good, and it's the only one that's good out of the entire showcase, in my opinion. Now on to one of my bigger showcases, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Starting off with, of course, Doctor Strange, with these custom printed dish pieces from Firestar Toys, and this really nice cloak of levitation that I'm super proud of how it turned out. You can see that I've painted on every detail of the like checkerboard pattern on his cloak, and even the little runes that are on the edge and the gold tips. You can also see, if the camera would focus, the texture of the pleated robes and his belt. This figure is pretty old, so the paintwork is a bit patchy, but it is still okay, I'd say. I was just starting out, this is my second showcase. It holds up pretty well for an early figure. If it weren't for the weird sculpting of the Eye of Agamotto and the belt paintwork, because that one is pretty blotchy, I think this would have been a pretty okay figure. Next up is Wanda in her WandaVision Scarlet Witch outfit. I made this because I didn't realize at the time of making the showcase video for Multiverse of Madness that they had changed her outfit, so I just made her WandaVision outfit and hoped it wouldn't look too bad. And this outfit is pretty good. It has a lot of really nice texture, and that custom head from Firestar Toys works pretty well for Wanda. Plus, I do like this combination of her hood and cape, and I think it looks pretty accurate to Wanda in that show. But I also like this newer version of the Scarlet Witch that I made later in the year, with the more texture of the burgundy and the black and the flamenco reds and the gunmetal. I think this one is a lot better. If it weren't for her damaged part of her outfit that's on the body armor, I think this would look really well, because that damaged portion was super difficult to paint. It took me like a full week or two just to paint that part. Next up is America Chavez, and yes, before I get any comments, I forgot to sculpt the bulk that I usually sculpt on female characters, but that was just because I had run out of supplies at this point. I didn't even have a curved torso to do, so sorry about that. But I think other than that, the jacket and the pants and the belt make this a pretty good figure. Next up is one of you guys' favorites, my Mr. Fantastic. This was actually a request put in by one of my viewers, and I am pretty proud of how this turned out. I think the detail on this is really good, and the color scheme of this is really good too. The face is custom painted. Next is one of my favorite showcases, the Miss Marvel one. This one was actually a contest winner in Calsta's Lego Custom Contest. I'm really proud of how this one turned out. The metallic navy blue on the sides of the torso and the texture of the regular blue mixed with the metallic blue is really good. I also made Bruno in his suit from the scene where they do the dance at the wedding, and I am really proud of how this suit turned out. You've all been asking for it, here it is. Thor Love and Thunder. These figures are okay. I think the paint work could have been better, but I really like some of these. They don't have that much detail. As you can see, there's not much back detail on Jane Foster's Thor here, but other than that, I think these figures are pretty good. This one is not one of my favorites because I think the sculpting could have used a lot of work. There wasn't that much bulk necessary, and the cape is disproportionate to it, but I think the color scheme of it was pretty good. I'd give this figure a solid 6 out of 10. It's not one of my best, but it's not really a worse one either. And of course, there is very little back detail here. This next one is one of my favorite Thor suits. It's the Viking Thor suit that a lot of YouTubers, including me, have been saying should have been the main Thor suit for this movie. It's a lot better than the blue one, in my opinion. And this suit was really fun to make. I used a custom range trooper cape for the fur, and I painted on a dark brown color and that grayish brown color. And you can also see how it looks with the Lego official hairpiece. I think it looks okay, but yeah, I'm really proud of how this one turned out. So there you go, guys, especially you, Tommy. I didn't forget about you. Next up is Moon Knight, and in this one, I've made 7 figures. This is by far my biggest showcase. The first one is Stephen Grant in one of his museum shop outfits, and this is a fairly simplistic figure. I wish I had added a bit more detail on his pants, but I think other than that, it's pretty good. Next up is Steven/Mark in the bloody hoodie and khaki jacket outfit. I'm really proud of how this jacket turned out. I just really wish I had painted on the shoes, because that generic pants didn't really go well. But I am really proud of the texture on his hoodie and on his shirt. I think that turned out really well. And this custom piece from Farstar Toys for the Scarab goes really well with this figure. The rest of the figure is pretty good. There's a lot of detail on the pockets, such as his silver buttons and things, and the detail on his sleeves, but other than that, there's not much to it. Next up is Steven in his outfit from the Jackal chase scene, and for this figure, I kept the regular Poe Dameron head, but I gave him a custom satchel made out of construction paper, and I even gave him a flashlight for him to go exploring in the museum. I think this design for the flashlight was pretty good. It's one of my favorite accessories. If I take the satchel off, you can get a look at how his dress shirt is underneath that satchel and how it looks, if the camera will focus, without it. There is a lot of detail on his jacket, like the dark purple lines to give it more definition. I just wish I had painted the legs a bit more to give it more detail. Here's one of my newer figures. I've made Layla in her archaeologist outfit, and I'm really proud of how this one turned out. I remember I had tried to make Layla in her archaeologist outfit earlier, right before the showcase, but with every single figure that I was making, there was just not enough time to do Layla. I have kept a few of this stuff, like those arms and her hands are reused, but the rest is freshly painted. Next up is one of my favorites, the Mr. Knight figure. This one has a lot of variations, as the jacket is actually removable, and since you last saw this figure in the original showcase video, I've added the details of his sandals, and I actually painted on more texture onto his legs, whereas earlier it was just plain white legs. The main reason I love this figure is because of that texture, the gray and the white. It just really makes this figure pop and stand out. If I take the jacket off, you can see that it has a different version where it's just him and his vest, and this suit version also has that same texture of the dashed lines. You can get a closer look at his tie and his collar and the little details on his vest's lapels, and you can see how it looks with the custom painted truncheons, that's the word. This figure is one of my favorites, and I think it's going to stay that way for a while. One of my newer figures, actually, and this one is actually my mom's favorite, is this Scarlet Scarab figure. And this figure, boy, let me tell you, this figure has texture. This figure has some of the most detailed work. And this figure, because of that much detail, took me like a month and a half to do just the painting. There's the triangle details of her bodice and the wing details of it, and the jewels, and her skirt is painted, and her legs are painted, and her boots, and the back of her torso, even though you probably aren't going to see it. And this head and arms actually came from Firestar Toys' custom Scarlet Scarab, but they didn't have a very accurate figure, so I just used their parts to make my own, and I'm really proud of how this one turned out. And finally, we have the first figure that I ever worked on, this Moon Knight figure. This figure comes with a custom hood piece that I got from an old Ninjago Hands of Time Acronix and Crux figure that I heavily sanded and then painted with white and light gray, and it is just covered, and I mean absolutely covered in sticker paper. There's a bunch of glue and paper that went into making this as textured as it is possible. You can see that I even added gold detailing underneath the texture of his crescent logo, and I even painted on the blood on his crescent darts, and I painted on the lettering, and I added some more detail to the boots recently. This figure is one of my favorites, mainly because it was the first figure that I ever did when I started to get into this business, and it's really good. I actually bought the Firestar Toys custom Moon Knight, and one of the reasons I bought that was that I could trace out their crescent cape and use it to make my own, and I'm really proud of how this one turned out. I think it looks really good. And it's always going to hold a special place in my heart because of that first video. They got 17,000 views and 27 subscribers in one day, which is unprecedented for me. I did not expect that. Well, anyways, thank you guys for sticking with me throughout this video and throughout the rest of this year as you've seen me progress in my painting skills. There will be a lot more videos coming in 2023, and I promise you the uploads are going to get a lot more frequent from now on. But with all that said, this has been the Minifig Maker, and always remember, good art takes time, so never stop creating.